Have you ever noticed something that just doesn't seem fair? You know someone who works incredibly hard. They're honest, reliable. They keep their word. They show up when they say they will. They help people whenever they can. On paper, they should be winning. But somehow, they're not. Meanwhile, another person comes along. They aren't necessarily smarter. They don't work harder. They don't seem more qualified. Yet people are drawn to them. They have more friends. They get more opportunities. They attract more attention. People remember them. And sometimes they even make more money. So what's going on? Most people think success is all about effort. Work harder, give more, sacrifice more, be more loyal, be more helpful, and eventually life will reward you. That sounds nice. The problem is that real life doesn't always work that way. Because human beings are not machines. We are emotional creatures, and emotions drive far more decisions than logic ever will. Think about it. How many movies do you remember from 10 years ago? Probably quite a few. Now think about a random school textbook you read 10 years ago. Most people can barely remember a single page. Why? Because the movie made you feel something. The textbook simply gave you information. Information is easy to forget. Emotion is hard to forget. That simple truth explains a huge part of how relationships, business, marketing, and even success actually work. The biggest mistake many hardworking people make is assuming that value alone is enough. They think, if I'm useful, people will appreciate me. If I'm loyal, people will stay. If I work hard, people will notice. Sometimes they do, but often they don't. Because being valuable and being memorable are two different things. And in today's world, being memorable matters more than ever. Look at social media. Every day, millions of people post content. Some of it is educational, some of it is informative, some of it is technically excellent. Yet most of it gets ignored. Why? Because it creates no emotional reaction. The posts people share are usually not the most accurate. They're the ones that make people laugh, get angry, feel inspired, feel shocked, feel understood, feel curious. Emotion creates attention, and attention creates influence. This isn't just true online. It's true everywhere. Imagine two people walking into a room. The first person is competent, polite, and responsible. The second person is energetic, charismatic, and knows how to make people feel good. Who do you think most people will remember? Usually the second person, not because they're better, not because they're more ethical, but because they created an emotional experience. People remember how you make them feel. That phrase gets repeated so often that it sounds like a cliche, but it's repeated because it's true. Think about your own life. You probably don't remember every conversation you've had. You probably don't remember every piece of advice someone gave you, but you absolutely remember certain people. Maybe a teacher who believed in you. Maybe a friend who made you laugh during a difficult time. Maybe someone who broke your heart. Why do you remember them? Because they triggered emotion. Strong emotions create strong memories, and strong memories create influence. This is one reason why many so-called nice guys struggle in dating. Now, before anyone gets angry, let's be clear. Being kind is a good thing. Being respectful is a good thing. Being honest is a good thing. But kindness alone doesn't automatically create attraction. Many people confuse being nice with being emotionally engaging. They're not the same thing. Someone can be extremely nice and still be boring. Someone can be generous and still be forgettable. Someone can care deeply and still fail to create connection. Because connection requires emotion. Imagine one person constantly sending messages like, "Good morning. What are you doing? Did you eat? How was your day?" There's nothing wrong with those messages, but after a while they become predictable. Now imagine another person who doesn't text constantly. But when they do, they tell interesting stories. They make you laugh. They challenge your ideas. They ask meaningful questions. They make the conversation memorable. Who will have the greater impact?
most cases, the second person. Because frequency is not the same as intensity. This idea extends far beyond dating. It applies to business too. A lot of small business owners focus entirely on providing a service, and that's important. But the businesses that people rave about often do something extra. They create an experience. Think about your favorite restaurant. It might not even have the best food, but maybe the atmosphere feels special. Maybe the staff remembers your name. Maybe the place has a unique personality. Maybe it simply makes you feel good. That's emotional value, and emotional value is often what separates average businesses from unforgettable ones. The same thing happens in careers. Many people assume that if they quietly work hard, someone will eventually notice. Sometimes that happens, but often the people who move ahead are the ones who know how to communicate their value. They know how to tell stories. They know how to inspire confidence. They know how to create excitement around ideas. In other words, they understand people, and understanding people is one of the most valuable skills anyone can develop. Because success is rarely just about products, it's rarely just about knowledge, and it's rarely just about effort. Success is often about influence, and influence is emotional. This doesn't mean you should become fake. It doesn't mean you should manipulate people. It doesn't mean you should turn into someone you're not. What it means is that effort alone is not enough. Being useful matters, but being memorable matters too. Being competent matters, but being emotionally engaging matters too. The people who consistently win in life are often not the strongest, smartest, or hardest working people in the room. They're the people who understand a simple truth. Human beings make decisions emotionally first and logically second. Once you understand that, a lot of things that once seemed unfair suddenly start to make sense, and it completely changes the way you think about relationships, influence, opportunity, and success.
One of the hardest truths for many people to accept is this. People don't always reward effort. They reward the experience they receive. At first, that sounds unfair. After all, shouldn't the person who sacrifices more get the better result? Shouldn't the person who cares more be appreciated more? Shouldn't the person who gives more be chosen more often? In an ideal world, maybe. But human psychology doesn't work that way. People don't experience your effort directly. They experience the outcome of your effort. And more importantly, they experience how your actions make them feel. That's a huge difference. Imagine two people spending exactly the same amount of money on someone they care about. Both spent $8,000. The amount is identical. The sacrifice is identical. But the experience is completely different. The first person simply transfers the money. Here, use this however you want. It's practical, it's generous, it's sincere. But emotionally, not much happens. The recipient might appreciate it, they might even feel grateful. But the emotional impact is often limited. Now imagine the second person. They spend time planning. They organize a special evening. They create surprises. They pay attention to details. They create moments that feel memorable. The amount of money may be exactly the same, but the emotional experience is far more powerful. And that's usually what people remember. This principle explains so much about human behavior. Why do people spend hundreds of dollars going to concerts when they can listen to the same songs for free? Because they're not buying music. They're buying an experience. Why do tourists travel across the world to see places they've already seen in photos? Because they're not buying information. They're buying emotion. Why do companies spend billions on branding? Because they're not selling products. They're selling feelings. The reality is that people rarely buy things based on logic alone. They buy stories. They buy identity. They buy experiences. They buy emotions. Think about some of the world's most successful brands. People don't line up outside stores because they desperately need another product. Many times they're chasing the feeling associated with that product. The feeling of status. The feeling of belonging. The feeling of success. The feeling of confidence. emotion is often the real product. This applies to personal relationships too. Many people believe that being a good partner simply means giving more time, more money, more favors, more sacrifices. But relationships aren't accounting systems. Nobody is sitting there calculating every contribution with a spreadsheet. Human beings remember moments. They remember laughter. They remember adventures. They remember emotional highs and lows. They remember how alive they felt around someone. That's why two people can invest the same amount of time into a relationship and get completely different results. One person creates routine. The other creates memories. Guess which one usually leaves a stronger impression? This is also why some people become incredibly influential despite not speaking very often. A common mistake people make is believing that influence comes from frequency. They think, if I show up every day, people will remember me. If I message more often, people will think about me more. If I constantly stay visible, I'll become important. Sometimes that's true, but not always. Because frequency without impact becomes background noise. Think about advertisements. If you see the same boring ad 50 times, eventually your brain stops noticing it. But one powerful advertisement can stay in your memory for years. The same thing happens with people. Someone can talk every day and leave no impression. Someone else can appear occasionally and leave a lasting impact. Why? Because intensity beats repetition. Depth beats frequency. Meaning beats volume. Imagine two friends. Friend A contacts you every day. The conversations are always the same. Small talk, surface-level topics, nothing memorable. Friend B contacts you once every few weeks, but every conversation is fascinating. You discuss dreams, life goals, personal struggles, big ideas. You finish every conversation feeling energized. Who has the greater influence? Most people would choose friend B, not because they showed up more often, but because they created more emotional value. This idea is especially important today because we live in the attention economy. Every app on your phone is competing for attention. Every creator is competing for attention. Every business is competing for attention. And attention is driven by emotion. People share things that make them feel something. People remember things that make them feel something. People talk about things that make them feel something. Emotion acts like a spotlight. It tells the brain, this matters. This is important. Pay attention. Without emotion, most information simply disappears. That's why storytelling is so powerful. Facts inform, stories transform. Facts tell people what happened. Stories make people feel what happened. And people are far more likely to remember feelings than facts. The most successful communicators understand this. The best teachers understand this. The best marketers understand this. The best leaders understand this. They don't simply provide information. They create experiences. They don't simply speak to the mind. They speak to emotions. Now, this doesn't mean you should become manipulative. There's an important difference between creating emotion and exploiting emotion. Manipulation uses emotions to deceive people. Influence uses emotions to connect with people. One destroys trust. The other builds trust. The goal isn't to fake excitement. The goal isn't to create drama where none exists. The goal is to understand that humans are emotional creatures. If you ignore emotions completely, you're ignoring one of the most important parts of human nature. Many hardworking people spend years focusing only on what they give. Very few spend time thinking about what others actually experience. But that shift in perspective changes everything. Instead of asking, how much did I do? Ask, what did people feel? Instead of asking, how much effort did I put in? Ask, what experience did I create? Because in relationships, business, leadership, sales, and life itself, people rarely remember the amount of effort behind the scenes. They remember the feeling that effort created. And the people who understand that principle gain an advantage that has nothing to do with talent, luck, or money. They understand that human beings don't simply choose the biggest effort. Most of the time, they choose the strongest experience. If emotions create attention, then there's another question we need to answer. Why do some people stay stuck for years while others suddenly seem to explode with success? You've probably seen it happen. Someone struggles for years. Almost nobody notices them. Their content gets no views. Their business grows slowly. Their income barely moves. Then suddenly, everything changes. Their audience grows. Their opportunities multiply. People start talking about them everywhere. From the outside, it looks like an overnight success, but it almost never is. What you're seeing is the result of something most people don't understand. Success is often non-linear. In other words, the rewards don't grow at the same speed as the effort. Most people expect life to work like this: work a little more, earn a little more, improve a little more, get a little more success. Step by step, nice and predictable. But many of the biggest breakthroughs in life don't happen that way. Sometimes you work for months and see almost no results. Sometimes you work for years and feel like nothing is happening. Then suddenly, everything compounds. The problem is that most people quit before they reach that point. Think about planting a tree. When you put a seed into the ground, nothing exciting happens. Days pass, weeks pass, maybe even months. You don't see much growth. If someone judged the process too early, they'd assume a seed wasn't working. What they don't see is what's happening underground. Roots are forming. The foundation is growing. The invisible work is being done. Then one day, visible growth starts to appear. Life often works the same way. The biggest mistake people make is judging progress only by what they can see. If results don't arrive quickly, they assume they're failing. So they change direction, they switch goals, they start something new. Then they repeat the cycle again, and again, and again. As a result, they never stay anywhere long enough to benefit from compounding. This is especially common in today's world. People see someone becoming successful on YouTube, so they start a channel. 3 months later, they aren't growing. They quit. Then they see someone making money through online businesses. They switch. 6 months later, they quit again. Then they try trading, then e-commerce, then coaching, then something else. They're always moving, always starting, always chasing, but never building. The irony is that hard work isn't usually their problem. Many of these people are working extremely hard. The problem is lack of focus. They keep digging new holes instead of digging one hole deep enough to find water. Meanwhile, someone else chooses a direction and stays with it. For months, for years, even when nobody is watching, even when the rewards are small, even when people think they're wasting their time. At first, the focused person may appear foolish. Friends question them, family members doubt them. People ask, why are you still doing that? Is it even working? Wouldn't it be smarter to try something else? Those questions become harder to ignore when results are slow, because everybody loves success, but very few people enjoy the process that creates it. The process is usually boring, repetitive, frustrating, lonely. Most successful creators know exactly what this feels like. Before anyone watched their videos, they were still filming. Before anyone shared their content, they were still posting. Before anyone called them successful, they were still learning. While other people were spending weekends relaxing, they were improving their skills. While other people were waiting for motivation, they were building consistency. That's the part nobody sees. People love the breakthrough. They rarely notice the preparation. And here's something even more important. When you're trying to build something meaningful, there are seasons in life where balance is overrated. Now, that doesn't mean destroying your health. It doesn't mean ignoring your family. It doesn't mean becoming obsessed to an unhealthy degree. But it does mean accepting that extraordinary results often require extraordinary focus. Many people want exceptional outcomes while maintaining average commitment. Unfortunately, life doesn't usually work that way. If you're trying to build a business from scratch, grow a channel, write a book, or develop a valuable skill, there may be periods where that goal requires a huge percentage of your attention. That's not extremism. That's prioritization. Every successful person has made sacrifices, not because sacrifice is glamorous, but because attention is limited. Every hour spent on one thing is an hour not spent on something else. The people who eventually break through understand this.
Instead of trying to do everything, they choose one thing and push hard. This is where another important idea comes in. Most people underestimate the power of intensity. They focus entirely on consistency. And consistency matters, but consistency without intensity can become comfortable. Intensity creates momentum. Intensity accelerates learning. Intensity separates casual interest from serious commitment. Think about learning a language. Practicing 10 minutes a week might technically be consistent, but the progress will be painfully slow. Now imagine immersing yourself for several hours every day. The difference is dramatic. The same principle applies to almost every area of life. Focused effort creates disproportionate results. Scattered effort creates scattered results. This is why many successful people appear obsessed during certain phases of their lives. They're not necessarily smarter than everyone else. They're simply concentrating their energy where it matters most. And concentration is becoming increasingly rare in a distracted world. Every day people are pulled in 1,000 directions. Notifications, entertainment, news, social media, endless distractions. The ability to stay focused on one meaningful goal for a long period of time has become a competitive advantage. In fact, it might be one of the greatest advantages available today. Because while most people are constantly restarting, a small group keeps building. While most people chase the next opportunity, a small group compounds their efforts. While most people look for quick wins, a small group prepares for big wins. And eventually, the gap becomes impossible to ignore. What looks like luck from a distance is often years of focused effort finally becoming visible. The breakthrough wasn't sudden, the recognition was. The success was an instant, the visibility was. And the people who understand this stop chasing immediate rewards. They start building foundations. They stop asking, how fast can I succeed? And start asking, how long can I stay focused? Because in the long run, the people who win are rarely the ones who move the fastest. They're the ones who stay in the game long enough for their efforts to compound.
One of the biggest traps people fall into is trying to make everyone like them. It sounds reasonable. After all, who doesn't want to be liked? Who doesn't want approval? Who doesn't want people to speak positively about them? The problem is that the more you try to please everyone, the more forgettable you become. Look around at the people who have the most influence, the biggest creators, the most recognizable brands, the most memorable public figures. Very few of them are universally loved. In fact, many of them are surprisingly polarizing. Some people admire them. Some people criticize them. Some people agree with everything they say. Others strongly disagree. But one thing is certain, people remember them. And in today's world, being remembered is often more valuable than being liked by everyone. Think about social media. Every day, people scroll through hundreds of posts. Most are forgotten within seconds. Not because they're bad, not because they're wrong, but because they're safe. They don't stand for anything. They don't create any emotional reaction. They don't leave an impression. They're designed to offend nobody. Unfortunately, they're also designed to excite nobody. Human attention naturally moves toward contrast, toward uniqueness, toward things that feel different. That's why controversial opinions often spread faster than balanced ones. That's why bold personalities attract more attention than cautious personalities. That's why strong viewpoints generate more engagement than neutral ones. People react to clarity. They react to conviction. They react to confidence. Now, that doesn't mean being extreme for the sake of being extreme. That's where many people get confused. Being different is not the same as being reckless. Being memorable is not the same as being offensive. And having a strong identity is not the same as attacking people. The real lesson is much simpler. You need something that makes people remember you. Without that, you're just another face in the crowd. Let's imagine two creators starting YouTube channels. The first creator talks about self-improvement, but their opinions are vague. They agree with everybody. They never take a clear position. Every video sounds like, both sides have a point. It depends. Everyone is right in their own way. Technically, nothing is wrong with that, but it doesn't create much impact. Now imagine a second creator. They still discuss self-improvement, but they have a distinctive perspective. Maybe they strongly believe discipline matters more than motivation. Maybe they challenge popular advice. Maybe they explain ideas in a unique way. People may not always agree with them, but they remember them. And that's the difference. The first creator blends in. The second creator stands out. The internet rewards visibility. Visibility rewards distinction, and distinction comes from having a clear identity. This applies far beyond content creation. It applies to careers too. Many people try to become well-rounded, and being well-rounded is useful, but sometimes being exceptional at one thing creates far more opportunities than being average at 10 things. Think about people you know. What makes them memorable? Usually, it's not because they're good at everything. It's because one particular trait stands out. Maybe they're incredibly funny. Maybe they're a fantastic storyteller. Maybe they're amazingly calm under pressure. Maybe they're unusually honest. Maybe they're incredibly creative. Maybe they have a unique way of explaining ideas. One characteristic becomes their signature. That signature becomes their identity, and that identity becomes their advantage. A common mistake people make when building a personal brand is trying to showcase every aspect of themselves at once. They want people to know they're intelligent, funny, hardworking, creative, kind, disciplined, interesting, successful, confident. The result? Nobody knows what to remember. The image becomes blurry. Human beings remember simple patterns, clear signals, strong associations. If someone asked 100 people to describe you in one sentence, what would they say? That's an important question, because your answer reveals your personal brand. Whether you're intentionally building one or not, the strongest brands in the world understand this principle. When you think of certain companies, specific ideas immediately come to mind. Not because those companies do only one thing, but because they consistently emphasize a few core qualities. The same strategy works for individuals. When people know exactly what you represent, trust develops faster. Recognition grows faster. Influence grows faster. Another reason being different matters is that competition is everywhere. There are millions of creators, millions of businesses, millions of professionals, millions of talented people. Being good is no longer enough. The world is full of good. Good has become normal. What captures attention is uniqueness. What creates opportunity is uniqueness. What builds loyalty is uniqueness. People don't talk about things they've seen 1,000 times before. They talk about things that surprise them. This is why many successful creators intentionally amplify certain aspects of their personalities. The funny person becomes funnier. The direct person becomes more direct. The energetic person becomes more energetic. The storyteller tells better stories. They're not necessarily becoming fake. They're becoming clearer. They're making it easier for people to understand who they are. And clarity is powerful because confusion kills attention. The truth is, most people spend their lives trying to hide their differences. They worry about standing out. They worry about criticism. They worry about being judged. So they play it safe. They become smaller versions of themselves. The people who break through often do the opposite. They identify what makes them unique. Then they lean into it. They sharpen it. They develop it. They make it impossible to ignore. Of course, not everyone will like them. That's inevitable. The moment you become memorable, criticism appears. The moment you develop a strong identity, disagreement appears. The moment you stand for something, some people will stand against it. That's not a sign you're doing something wrong. It's often a sign that people are finally paying attention. The goal isn't to have everyone agree with you. The goal is to be clear enough that the right people recognize you. Because success rarely comes from being everybody's favorite person. More often, it comes from becoming unforgettable to a specific group of people. And in a world overflowing with noise, being unforgettable is one of the most valuable assets you can have.
One of the biggest reasons people fail to stand out is that they spread themselves too thin. They try to be everything at once. They chase every opportunity. They follow every trend. They jump from one idea to another. And without realizing it, they become stuck in a cycle of constant motion but very little progress. From the outside, they look busy. But being busy and being effective are two very different things. A lot of people spend their lives moving. Very few spend their lives building. And building requires focus. Think about a knife. A dull knife and a sharp knife may be made from the same material. They may even be the same size. The difference is concentration. The sharp knife focuses its force into a tiny point. That's why it cuts so easily. The dull knife spreads its force everywhere. That's why it struggles. Human effort works the same way. When your energy is scattered across 10 different goals, the impact becomes weak. When your energy is concentrated on one goal, the impact becomes powerful. This is why many successful people seem obsessed with one thing during their early years. They're not trying to win everywhere. They're trying to dominate somewhere. That's a completely different strategy. Unfortunately, most people are uncomfortable with that approach. Why? Because focus requires sacrifice, and sacrifice creates fear. The moment you choose one path, you're saying no to many others. The moment you commit to one opportunity, you're giving up countless alternatives. Most people hate that feeling. They want certainty. They want guarantees. They want proof that the path will work before they fully commit. But life rarely provides those guarantees. Sometimes you have to go all in before the evidence appears. This is especially true in content creation. Many new creators spend years searching for the perfect niche, the perfect format, the perfect strategy, the perfect audience, the perfect idea. They keep adjusting, keep changing, keep experimenting. And while experimentation is important, endless experimentation often becomes a form of avoidance. They're afraid of committing. They're afraid of being judged. They're afraid of failing publicly. So they stay in preparation mode forever. Meanwhile, someone else picks a direction and starts building. They improve through action. They discover what works through repetition. And over time, they develop something most people never achieve: a recognizable identity. When someone becomes known for one thing, opportunities start finding them. Think about the most successful creators online. Most didn't become famous by talking about everything. They became known for something specific. One idea, one perspective, one strength, one recognizable characteristic. Over time, that characteristic became their brand, and that brand became valuable. The same principle applies in business. Imagine two restaurants. The first serves everything: pizza, burgers, steak, seafood, tacos, sushi, pasta. The second restaurant focuses on one thing and does it exceptionally well. Which one is easier to remember? Which one is easier to recommend? Which one is easier to build a reputation around? Usually the second one, because specialization creates clarity, and clarity creates trust. People trust experts. People trust specialists. People trust individuals who clearly know what they stand for. The problem is that specialization often feels limiting in the beginning. When you're unknown, saying yes to everything feels safer. But over time, saying yes to everything becomes the very thing holding you back. Every strong personal brand is built on a clear association. When people hear your name, something specific should come to mind. That's how influence is built. Not through complexity, through clarity. This is why some creators intentionally amplify certain parts of their personality. Not because they're pretending, but because they understand psychology. People remember strong signals. They forget weak ones. Imagine someone who's slightly funny, slightly smart, slightly creative, slightly confident. Nothing stands out. Now imagine someone who is incredibly funny. That single trait becomes memorable. It becomes their identity. It becomes their advantage. The same thing happens with public figures, entrepreneurs, entertainers, and content creators. The characteristics that make them famous are often the characteristics they chose to develop deeply. What makes this difficult is that society often encourages people to blend in. From childhood, we're taught not to be too different, not to be too loud, not to be too bold, not to attract too much attention. And while those lessons may help people avoid criticism, they also make it harder to become memorable. The truth is that standing out requires a certain amount of courage. Because the moment you become noticeable, people start having opinions about you. Some will admire you. Some will misunderstand you. Some will criticize you. That's unavoidable. But obscurity has a cost too.
If nobody notices you, nobody remembers you. If nobody remembers you, opportunities become harder to find. This doesn't mean becoming controversial for attention. It doesn't mean creating fake drama. It doesn't mean turning into someone you're not. It means identifying your strengths and turning up the volume. It means taking the most authentic parts of yourself and making them impossible to miss. Maybe you're naturally insightful. Lean into that. Maybe you're naturally entertaining. Lean into that. Maybe you're naturally analytical. Lean into that. Maybe you're naturally direct. Lean into that. The goal isn't to copy somebody else's personality. The goal is to make your own personality more visible. Because in a crowded world, being average is invisible. People don't remember average. People remember distinctive. People remember unique. People remember clear. And that's where many breakthroughs begin. Not when you try to appeal to everyone, but when you become unforgettable to someone. The people who build influence, attract opportunities, and create lasting success understand a simple principle. Going deep beats going wide. Focus beats distraction. Clarity beats complexity. And the people who commit to one sharp identity often outperform those who spend their lives trying to be everything at once.
If there's one lesson that ties everything together, it's this. Most people focus on effort. Successful people focus on impact. At first glance, those two things seem identical. They're not. Effort is about what you do. Impact is about what other people experience. And that difference changes everything. Think about how most people approach life. They work hard. They stay busy. They spend hours on tasks. They put in time. They put in energy. And then they wonder why the results aren't matching the effort. The answer is often simple. They measured the input. They never measured the impact. The world doesn't reward effort equally. The world rewards results. And results are usually created when effort reaches people in a meaningful way. Imagine two people giving gifts. The first person buys something because they feel obligated. The second person spends time understanding exactly what the other person wants. The price may be identical. The effort may be similar. But the impact is completely different. One gift gets a polite thank you. The other gift becomes something the other person remembers for years. Why? Because impact is created through understanding, not just action. This principle applies everywhere. In friendships, in business, in leadership, in marketing, in sales, in content creation, and in everyday life. A lot of people think success comes from doing more. More posts, more meetings, more products, more conversations, more hours. Sometimes that's true. But often the bigger breakthrough comes from doing fewer things better. A single great conversation can be more valuable than 100 forgettable ones. A single outstanding product can outperform 10 average products. A single memorable video can attract more attention than 100 boring uploads. That's because human beings don't remember volume. They remember significance. Think about your own life. How many average days can you clearly remember from 5 years ago? Probably not many. But you can probably remember a few moments vividly. A major achievement, a difficult challenge, an unforgettable trip, a life-changing conversation. Those moments stand out because they created emotional impact. The same principle works when you're trying to influence others. People don't remember everything you say. They remember what moved them. People don't remember every service you provide. They remember how you made them feel. People don't remember every interaction. They remember the interactions that mattered. That's why great communicators focus on emotion. Great leaders focus on emotion. Great marketers focus on emotion. Great storytellers focus on emotion. Not because emotions replace logic, but because emotions give logic power. Without emotion, most information gets ignored.
Without emotion, most messages are forgotten. Without emotion, even valuable ideas can disappear into the background. This doesn't mean creating fake drama. It doesn't mean manipulating people. It means understanding human nature. People are emotional before they are rational. The most effective people understand both. They know how to provide real value, but they also know how to present that value in a way people can feel. That's a skill. And like any skill, it can be developed. One mistake many people make is assuming that quality alone will speak for itself. Sometimes it does, but often it doesn't. There are incredibly talented people nobody knows. There are brilliant ideas nobody hears. There are amazing products that never become successful, not because they lacked quality, but because they lacked visibility. And visibility requires attention. Attention requires emotion. This is especially true in today's world. We're surrounded by noise. Every day, people are bombarded with content, advertisements, videos, messages, emails, notifications, opinions. Information is no longer scarce. Attention is. That's why creating an emotional connection has become more valuable than ever. People are not choosing between information. They're choosing between experiences. The businesses that win create better experiences. The creators that win create better experiences. The leaders that win create better experiences. The people who build strong relationships create better experiences. Everything comes back to the same idea. How do people feel after interacting with you? Do they feel inspired? Do they feel understood? Do they feel energized? Do they feel respected? Do they feel valued? Or do they simply forget the interaction happened? That question matters more than most people realize. Because influence isn't about controlling people. It's about creating meaningful experiences. The strongest personal brands aren't built on perfection. They're built on memorability. The strongest businesses aren't built on being the cheapest. They're built on delivering experiences people want to talk about. The strongest relationships aren't built on endless effort. They're built on meaningful connection. And meaningful connection is emotional. When you look at highly successful people, it's easy to focus on the visible things. The money, the audience, the recognition, the lifestyle. But underneath all of that is usually one powerful ability. The ability to make people care, to make people listen, to make people remember, to make people feel something. That's what creates influence. That's what creates loyalty. That's what creates opportunity. And that's what creates momentum. So if you take one lesson away from this entire discussion, let it be this. Don't just ask yourself how hard you're working. Ask yourself what kind of impact you're creating. Don't just measure effort. Measure influence. Don't just focus on what you're doing. Focus on what other people are experiencing. Because in the end, people rarely remember how many hours you worked. They rarely remember how much energy you spent. They rarely remember how difficult the process was for you. What they remember is the impact you had on their lives. And the people who understand that truth gain an advantage that effort alone can never provide. They stop trying to do more. They start trying to matter more. And that's where real influence begins.